Now, one of my fellow moderators for tomorrow night's debate, John Ralston, editor of the Nevada Independent, also an MSNBC political analyst. Also with me is Neera Tanden, president and CEO for the Center for American Progress. She's also a former senior advisor to Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. Neera, I want to start with you because I want to get you to respond to something Kevin Sheekey said yesterday. It was talking about Sanders, but essentially it was narrowing the race down, and he wrote this. At this point, the primary is Bernie's to lose and ours to win. Bernie knows this. Trump knows this. That's why they are united in the campaign against Mike. You know, you look at our poll and you look at his bank account, Neera, and you understand why the Bloomberg campaigns made that analysis. Do you agree with it?
I mean, obviously, Vice President Biden, even in your poll, is still in this race. I do think one of the challenges is that there are many moderates, and Senator Sanders has definitely brought together the left, very liberal lane of the Democratic Party, which is a significant, important lane. He's consolidated that more than the moderates have been able to any single moderate has been able to consolidate. In an individual state, you've seen an alternative with Pete Buttigieg in Iowa and New Hampshire. Right. But now we're in a more diverse state like Nevada, and then you go into Super Tuesday. And I do think if there's going to be an alternative, there has to be at least one or two alternatives on that day. Otherwise, It is set up very well for Senator Sanders.
John, I haven't seen the same left-right argument out here that you did see in Iowa and New Hampshire. How would you describe it?
Well, it's like, well, what's really amazing is Elizabeth Warren, who was considered over on the left with Bernie, right, has almost disappeared from the conversation because of what happened in Iowa and New Hampshire. She's almost seen in the moderate lane now compared to Bernie. And so it hasn't happened. But Bernie has tried to make it left-right with Bloomberg. He's not even talking about the other
candidates. Bloomberg's not on this ballot.
He's not even on the ballot here, and Bernie keeps talking about Bloomberg because he loves the contrast with Bloomberg. But one thing about Biden, which I think is really interesting, Biden's people are very sensitive that the media narrative is that he's dead. He is going to be dead unless he changes the trajectory of the race, I think, here, Chuck.
They were right to say second place minimum.
Right.
They were right to say that in your opinion.
Absolutely. I mean, if he finishes in third, fourth, or fifth here, he's also ran in the first three states. How do you even make an argument that he is viable? So they're pouring a ton of resources in here. I don't think it's impossible at all that he finishes in second. And, of course, they're hoping for an upset of Bernie, and then they get that narrative, the comeback kid and all the rest of it.
Let me put up our head-to-heads from our poll, Neera, because the thing that jumped out in the head-to-head is this. Trump gets his best number. He still loses to Bernie, but his best number, raw number, is against Sanders, sitting at 46. But it is Biden that does the best against Trump. He's up 8, and more importantly, Neera, he is the only person ahead in the swing states outside the margin of error as well. He's got an 8-point lead in the swing states. Bloomberg and Sanders, it all goes down to basically 1. It's basically dead even in the swing states. Biden still has this general election strength with voters, even as Democrats are starting to peel away from him.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is very much the conundrum. When you look at Iowa and the Iowa polls, Vice President Biden still did the best against Trump in Iowa, a state that had seen all the candidates for a year. And Senator Sanders didn't do that well in Iowa against Trump, but did well on Election Day. I think the conundrum here is voters are measuring how candidates are doing on the stump. And so they're making that kind of analysis. The vice president has one of the strongest arguments. And I do think you'll see over the last couple of weeks, a lot of the moderates have been fighting a lot of the moderates. With the polls of Senator Sanders being so far ahead, I do think you'll see tomorrow and in South Carolina's debate next week, perhaps, a lot of criticism and focus on Bloomberg. But I would imagine there'd be some focus on Senator Sanders, too. I think the challenge for moderates is they keep fighting each other, and that's given Senator Sanders a strong, opportunity to move.
Well, I do think that it is a mistake to say that Joe Biden is done, and we're just talking about Bernie versus Bloomberg, and you got to give the Bloomberg folks credit for that. They're zooming right past it, right, pretending Biden doesn't exist, and saying you all thought that Biden was the moderate alternative. He's strong in the polls. I'm the guy. I am the guy who can.
Bernie loves it too because he doesn't want to deal with Biden.
Exactly
His
right.
people like Biden. They don't like Bloomberg.
Well, Bloomberg again is the perfect contrast for Bernie. He loves it.
Neera, very quick, how much Will some Democrats feel hesitant to go after Bloomberg because he is such an important donor?
No, I don't think so. I think people
You
will
don't
be
think
as
so?
critical.
You don't think some interest groups? I mean, does he have an endorsement from anybody that he hasn't given money to?
I mean, I can't speak to his endorsement, but he's going to have to defend his record as much as anyone else in this race. And I do think that there's been plenty of criticism over the last couple of days, couple of weeks, and I expect you'll see a fair amount of that.
All right.
And I think tomorrow is a very big day for him to show.
We're going to find out.
He can throw a punch too.
We will find out if he can take one and throw one. That's for sure. John Ralston, Neera Tanden. So is Trump politically stronger than ever? And how does that impact the Democratic primaries? John Ralston and Neera Tanden are both still with me. John, I want to start with you. The president is going to do what he did in the first two, which is have a rally out here. Nevada is a state that the Trump campaign would like to put into play. You remind me about once a week with Clark County voter registration numbers that the Republicans have already lost this state. I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but Trump's making a little national comeback. Is it going to? What does it take for Nevada to feel it?
Well, I think that the Trump campaign's premise here, and the Clark County, Las Vegas numbers, that's where 2/3, 3/4 of the vote is. The Democrats just keep expanding their lead there. We're going to see more after the caucuses because of same-day registration.
Right.
There's no way the state should be in play for Trump. But I think what they're banking on now is they think that Bernie is going to be the nominee, or they hope that Bernie is going to be the nominee, and that puts Nevada in play. I'm not so sure they're right, but I think that's about the only chance that they have. But
Do you buy that Bernie would put it in play?
I don't necessarily buy that. I'm not. Listen, I don't even know what conventional wisdom is anymore. But let me just say one thing. Trump's going to hold this rally, thousands of people at the Las Vegas Convention Center.
Yeah.
Why do you think it's out of the realm of possibility, Chuck, that he says to everybody in that room, go caucus tomorrow and caucus for Bernie?
Yeah, no,
it's the kind of thing he would do.
It's not out of the realm. Neera, when you look at the president's numbers, I'm going to put them up. A majority favor the decision the Senate made, narrowly, but they do favor it. 47% oppose it, but 51% narrowly favor it. But 53% believe his actions since he was impeached are not appropriate. Only 20% have called him appropriate. You look at these numbers, he looks stronger even as you tried to hold him accountable. I mean, what does that do to Democratic morale?
I mean, look, I think the president was always going to say that he was acquitted, and this is a moment what I think a lot of Democrats sort of expected after the trial. His behavior has been highly questionable since. He obviously feels unbowed. Look at what he did today with pardoning people who have engaged in political corruption. So I do think this is an interesting moment in the party, which is the party has been focused on electability for most of the last year.
Yep.
I think it is really a gut check time on whether they are really going to think about electability given where we are. Trump, a lot of Democrats, a lot of liberals have thought Trump is easy to beat. We're now at a moment where he seems harder to beat. Who is the best candidate who can put together a broad coalition that includes moderates and liberals to actually defeat him? I think that is the big question. And, I think that his strength could actually affect how people vote over the next several weeks.
Oh, I think it does have a little bit of an impact. John, is it better to make an economic argument against Trump in this state or a character argument?
Well, the character arguments have all been made, it seems to me, right, Chuck? And they don't stick. If he thinks he can pardon these,
or they're already stuck.
They're already
They
stuck.
may already
They're
be
baked.
stuck.
They're baked in, and maybe part of those numbers here. It's tough to make an economic argument against Trump in Nevada, though. Nevada was as down as any state when the Great Recession. There's been a rebound. The governor, who is a Democrat, and the Democrats control the state, they've touted the economic comeback. So it's tough to make an economic argument against Trump unless you make the Bernie-like argument, which is
systemic.
It's systemic. Not everyone is benefiting. There are people being left behind, which I think is what they'll do.
And Neera, is that the issue? It's sort of what should be the case? I mean, what do you think the case should be against him?
I think the case against Trump is that essentially on healthcare and on economic issues, people are still facing a squeeze. And I actually think this has been one of the problems in the primary. The primary hasn't debated how to get economic growth to people enough. It's really important to talk about inequality, but we actually also have to talk about how we're going to make people's lives better with better jobs.
The whole middle class out approach, it sounds like, is what you're advocating anyway. Neera Tanden in Washington, John Ralston out here. Thank you both.